Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for yet another Film Fanatic extravaganza. It is about 9:38 on a Saturday. Yes, it is Saturday. So I hope everyone's doing good. Sometimes it's easy to lose track of time or lose track of time as to what day it is. But hope everyone's doing good. I have been doing a series of some new videos where I'm talking all about one of my all-time favorite directors, and that is Martin Scorsese. So this is another video of where I'm kind of continuing to talk about yet another one of his just amazing films. So, and at the same time, I've been trying to, do some new things and mix up some not necessarily film centric based videos. I did a show yesterday on my favorite jazz group of all time, and that is the Miles Davis Quintet. That's one of my to go to groups, where I can listen to them anytime. It's an interesting thing. I think about, aside from, thinking about on how to do these videos, different ideas that I have, like this new one I'm doing now, which is coverage of the complete coverage of all of the films of Martin Scorsese. I've done I've done a few series where I kind of did the same thing. I did a show or a series of shows on the work of Stanley Kubrick, my favorite director of all time. But I'm always trying to think of things of mixing things up. So when I was doing the Miles Davis show, I was thinking about what's for me like my go-to. We all have those things that we kind of, we're all to a degree, a creature of habit. Some people don't necessarily work that well when they have, say a very regimented schedule. I tend to, I don't know, focus a little bit better, and I feel like I'm a little bit more productive when I have a pretty regimented schedule, where I'm kind of doing more or less the same things every day, and then I, maybe on the weekend or, 1 or 2 days here or there, I'll just totally, change up my routine. But generally, I keep the same routine, and I find, for the most part, it's a little bit more productive having that structure. Without any of that structure, it's way more, chaotic and prone to like being a little bit too all over the place. And with that, there's those movies, there's certain bands and groups that you kind of, you know, go to and can listen to, at any given moment. And I, realized when I was doing the Miles show, Miles is definitely, especially the quintet stuff, really anything by Miles, but especially the Miles quintet stuff, I can listen to that anytime. Just like my favorite group of all time, the electronic duo Autechre from England. It's something about those two groups. It's an interesting kind of thing, and I got into that into the video. But there's like they're so very different from each other, but yet I think that there's like kind of an odd connection between the two of them, even though they're so far removed. And I was thinking about that yesterday, and I can like throw in any of their music at any time, whether it's live stuff of theirs or studio recordings, whatever it is, and I can just listen to it at any given moment. The other thing is like kind of getting back to Scorsese is both for both groups, Altecker and the Miles Davis Quintet. Everything that I've heard that those groups, and in this case, director, there's like this consistency that runs throughout their entire career, which spans decades or a decade, and it's it's pretty miraculous. And so I think there isn't anything in any of their catalogs of art that I have reservations about, or that I don't really haven't really fully embraced. Everything I've just really loved, and so I can listen to any of those stages of whether it's live or recordings, live recordings or studio recordings. Same thing with Scorsese. There's like a certain kind of consistency, and it it gives me even more of a. I feel even more inspired by people and artists like that. I think for the most part, it's kind of rare. There are many examples of that, but it's a little bit more in the minority compared to other things. So very very cool. And Scorsese is one of those, is the same thing for me when it comes to films. I can't say anything negative about any of his films, and I just love his stuff so much. I need to. There's quite a few of his films that I don't own yet, which is kind of a shame. I need to upgrade. I need to get. I think all of his movies would be fabulous on uh, Blu-ray or 4K. I have a handful of his movies on Blu-ray, but not. I have Casino. I have The Wolf of Wall Street. I have The Departed. I have Mean Streets, which is my all-time favorite. I think I might have another one. Oh, Raging Bull. I have that on Blu-ray. That's really amazing. I have Taxi Driver, and I think I have one other one. And the rest of the movies, including today's show, I don't actually own, but I have probably seen this movie that I'm going to be talking about, which is Goodfellas. I have probably actually seen Goodfellas more than any other of his films when I think about it. Just because it's one of those films I've watched so many times, like, as a kid growing up with my family. My family's always been really into uh, movies about, to a degree, organized crime or the mafia. That's a big reason why, well, pretty much the main reason at the end of the day, why Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather is my favorite film of all time. So it's just great. And there's, like, I guess to a degree there's a correlation, because most of most of my family, mostly mostly comprised of like an Italian heritage. So growing up, I kind of grew up similar in that way, of where there was, these big family gatherings. There would be, lots of food to be eaten, lots of pasta, spaghetti sauce, meatballs, and just always having these big giant Italian meals. Growing up, where I grew up in New York, there was my family all lived pretty close to each other, and my grandmother actually, I grew up in the house that was across the street from my grandmother, so I would be over there a lot. And my grandparents on my mom's side, my grandfather was from Italy, or actually, my grandfather's parents were from Italy, and so my my grandfather was born born in New York City, but his parents were from New York. So we had, you know, and I've doing the family tree thing over the years. I remember my mom did a real extensive, kind of inquiry into that, and found that we have lots of relatives still, lots of family on, I think, my mom's side and my grandfather's side that still live in Italy. That is a place I would love to go to someday. But so I kind of grew up in an Italian household, so I understand that there's that. There's a sense of loyalty. There's it's you eat a lot of food, and you know, for the most part, everybody gets along, and it's a always a everything is kind of big, you know, go big or go home kind of a thing. Like for the holidays, we would always have these big family gatherings, you know, Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year's Eve. I was always accustomed to that. And since like when my family moved out of New York and moved to here in Maine, and then a couple of years later, I eventually did too. We usually have, for actually a very long time now, our holidays or our like holiday gatherings are, you know, very mellow and pretty quiet because it's usually just the three of us, and maybe there might be, you know, and occasionally there'll be one or two extra people, but usually they're pretty mellow. That this year my brother and his wife are coming up, but usually they're pretty mellow. And my relatives don't come up to here to New York, and we never usually go back down there. So, which is okay, but there's always been, you know, that Italian kind of heritage thing in my head, and I think that is also something to do with why um, The Godfather is my favorite film of all time. It's you know, and also today's topic, which is Martin Scorsese's Goodfellas. So, like I said, I don't actually own Goodfellas, which is super weird to me. Um, but out of all of the Scorsese movies, and I've seen most of his films, you know, a ton of times, and probably second to Goodfellas would probably be like Taxi Driver, which I'm gonna do a big show on. I think I might actually have a video where I did a show on Taxi Driver. The and it was probably, I have to really check. Sometimes it's easy for me to lose track, but I have to check. But if I didn't, I definitely have to do it. I know I did a show not that long ago on Mean Streets, so that's one. That's my favorite Scorsese movie, but that will be one that I won't be doing a show on because I already have it on the block. But I would say Taxi Driver is probably a close second to Goodfellas, or really, really close to being tied for first as far as how many times I've seen it. But with Taxi Driver, I have a bunch of different versions of that. I think I have like two or three copies of it on DVD. I have like one or two copies of it where it's just like the standard version, and then I have like a director's cut. But I do have it on Blu-ray, and it's a really amazing package. It's a you know, fully restored version, tons of special features, super awesome. Um, and I've seen that movie a shit ton of times, and you know, not even aside from owning it, but for some reason, Goodfellas is one of those movies that, you know, it was like, I don't know, a family outing when we would watch it. It would always be. I remember always watching it on. I mean, this is going back when cable was a regular thing, but like HBO and Cinemax and all those channels were a thing on regular, like your cable package that you would pay for at your house. You know, predating the whole streaming thing by, I don't know, 1,000 years. But Goodfellas was one of those movies that would be on like HBO, uncut, and we used to always watch it as a family. And then it was a movie that we used to rent like all the time. You know, whether it was on, you know, DVD or VHS or whatever, but it was always a movie that we would watch. And it's a movie that, and it probably still is, even though cable is a very different thing. It was a movie that was always, you know, in constant rotation, and it was heavily syndicated, just like The Godfather. You know, that, aside from seeing that movie a lot, you know, from the version that I own, which is only DVD, and I need to get that up. I need to get an upgrade on that too. Aside from watching that, you know, on DVD, my DVD box set that I have, same kind of thing with Goodfellas. That was a movie that was always on cable. We used to always watch as a family. We would rent those movies all the time, in a constant rotation. Another movie that was a regular part of our family kind of viewing was the original Die Hard. That movie too, like that, that's like I consider that to be a Christmas movie, and so that's very much almost like how I consider Godfather to be a holiday movie because it like takes place. A big portion of that film takes place around Christmas time, so I almost consider it a Christmas movie, even though I used to watch it more so around Thanksgiving. But I kind of consider that a holiday movie, as strange as that might sound. But Goodfellas, I mean, Goodfellas is easily one of the greatest movies or portrayals of like the mafia dynamic or film. Of course, this movie has been talked about. I think it's interesting for Martin Scorsese. I recently when I started doing this show, these different videos, I one of the movies I started out doing, or one of the movies I just covered, was a film called Shutter Island, and that was yet another collaboration between Scorsese and Leonardo DiCaprio. They have so many great films together, and I'll be eventually getting into more of those. I just did The Departed, also, which is just an amazing film. And they have like a long history, just an incredible career together. So many great films, and I'll be eventually getting into all of them. Um, but when I was doing the show on Shutter Island, which Shutter Island is probably, for Scorsese, probably the most polarizing film. There's some people that like that film, but a lot of people dislike that movie. And it, was really, I don't know, it wasn't really embraced by a lot of critics. A lot of people criticized that movie. Honestly, I even shared that opinion when I first saw it. Kind of had some expectations going into seeing that movie, but I was kind of disappointed. But I had a big switch around with that movie, and I actually really like it. I'd seen it once or twice on DVD, and I thought it was okay. There were some things about it I liked, but then there were some things where I felt like it kind of went askew or something. And it was mainly because I felt like that film is definitely has horror elements, and it goes into a little bit of a. I felt like Scorsese was trying to explore territory that he didn't necessarily feel comfortable in. I don't know, but that being said, I bought the film quite a few years later, actually fairly recently, and I've watched it a couple times on Blu-ray. And I have a really great copy of that on Blu-ray. I got a really cheap copy of it, but a really good edition. And I actually really like that movie a lot. It's grown on me quite a bit. And I've seen it about 3 times, and each time I've seen it, it's grown on me, and I like that movie quite a bit. So I have a totally different opinion of that movie. But that movie commercially, The Shutter Island, was actually the highest movie that made the most movie out of any of Scorsese's films in his entire career, which I was really surprised by, because that movie was really kind of pegged by and panned by critics and people, and it's not really regarded as one of his good films in a lot of ways. If you go through people who talk about films, like different reviews, or that movie's always kind of like discarded in a lot of ways. But that movie actually made the most money, which is wild. But that being said, I think probably his most widely embraced film, or his most talked about film, probably outside of Taxi Driver, is probably Goodfellas. And I mean, of course, you got just an amazing cast: Ray Liotta, of course, Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, just iconic. Paul Sorvino, Lorraine Bracco, Frank Vincent, just iconic. And this film's really about. I kind of always look at Goodfellas as being kind of like a modern day tale of like a modern day kind of cautionary tale about a person's rise to power, and what that person will do to rise to that, to rise to the occasion, and what they do with when they do have that power. What does that, once they've arrived to that at that level, what did they do with that power, and also, the fallout, the ramifications of maybe the actions that they took to get to that place. And this movie's really, I think, just kind of like a modern day kind of cautionary tale about that. And but of course, along the way, it's just it's an amazing tale of this organized crime family, and it's got some of the greatest dialogue. It's super brutal and super dark and violent, and it's got a lot of humor, but it's just so well done. The editing, the use of the music, it's like everything is. It's I think this movie is like a representation of like lightning in a bottle. It's just everything. It's one of those films I felt like feels like everything just connected all at once, and it's like perfect symmetry. This movie, it's kind of like a perfect movie. It's it's got everything. I think it's got all those elements. I mean, brilliant acting. You have Pesci and Joe Pesci and Robert De Niro. You have them at the height of their power. Ray Liotta, of course, who passed away recently, unfortunately. And you have these amazing actors at the height of their power. Scorsese in charge of this whole film. Just amazing, brilliant direction, amazing cinematography, and Scorsese is one of those directors that he can do these epic films that most directors don't do these days because of how much it costs, and just how just because of how ambitious is just how incredibly ambitious the scope of that is. I mean, he just recently the movie that inspired me to do this whole big show or series of shows on Scorsese is going. I just recently saw Killers of the Flower Moon, which is just a masterpiece, and I realize I've done a few shows on Scorsese over the years, and he always comes up in discussions, and he comes up a lot in these videos. So I was like, that combination of those things inspired me to like, well, I should just do shows on all of his movies, because there isn't a movie in his career that I don't love, and that I just think is just a 10 out of 10. So I was like, okay, this is that's what inspired, and I think Goodfellas is a 10 out of 10. I think it's got, like I said, it's perfect symmetry. It's an example of a master at his craft. The thing, and I was saying too, like the thing that he's such an ambitious filmmaker, and he isn't afraid to take on these giant epic tales. But and if a lot of these films were in the hands of, say, a less qualified or a less talented director, I think these films would probably drag. They'd be a little bit too long, or things would probably somehow get derailed. But with Scorsese's ability to direct these incredible epics, where you have films where the storyline of where Goodfellas, for instance, where it follows these characters over the span of decades, and recently The Irishman also. I mean, incredibly ambitious. Casino. I mean, he's done so many films like that. Raging Bull. Sometimes he gets criticized for making films that are too long, or why is Killers of the Flower Moon so long? Which it is a long movie, but again, if you look at his track record for making films and tackling these really ambitious, fully realized films, it's nothing new for him. I mean, a lot of his films have been, they're just these epics. So it's not really anything different for him to make a long film. And so, but being that he is so damn good and just such a master filmmaker, if it was handled by someone who was not as talented, obviously there would be, like I said, it would probably not connect the dots would not be connected. But with him, you have, master direction. You have him in charge of the captain of the ship, an impeccable cast, incredible writing. One of the things I think is one of the traits that his use of music, one of the traits and one of the strongest traits that I think Scorsese has is the way he cuts his films and the editing. And I noticed that, like with films that are, you know, that could be really slow or that are actually slow, but they could be boring, he is able to, make those longer films or segments feel shorter than they actually are, and it's due to the mastercraft editing that he's able to pull off. I think a great example of that is with Killers of the Flower Moon, a movie essentially where there's a lot of people talking in rooms. And the movie is long, but it does not feel as long as you think it would be because the editing is so well done. And you're constantly getting, this information. Even when there are moments of where you're not actually getting dialogue, or there might not be areas of where there's, action per se. So, but he is so great of crafting editing and the way he tells stories through the editing process. I think one of the best films that he ever edited, I think where it's just totally lightning in a bottle. Like that's the only way I can describe it. The Departed, like the way that film is edited, is just so like magical. And I think even The Wolf of Wall Street is another film which I'm going to be talking about. It just you're on this roller coaster, and it's just like it's just this great balance. And I think The Goodfellas is one of those films of where when I remember first seeing it, that's what really jumped out to me, and it still remains a thing. I haven't seen Goodfellas in actually a long time, and I need to see it again. I need to buy it, but one of the things is like just how pure electric that film is. It's just coming at you, but it's a balance where it's not a barrage. You're not being overwhelmed, but you're getting all this wonderful information, and it's so entertaining at the same time. But yeah, Goodfellas, one of the greatest films ever. I think it's probably the best movie about organized crime or the mafia kind of aesthetic outside of The Godfather. And yeah, it's hard to believe that Goodfellas came out in 1990, but amazing, amazing. It's a masterpiece. So, many people have talked about it, but maybe there are a few people out there that have never seen it. So you need to definitely check that out. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.